Welcome to Valor and Virtue. I'm Jim Danielson. We have with us today Lieutenant Colonel Tom Leonard, United States Marine Corps retired. And we'd like to begin, as always, asking the Lieutenant Colonel to tell us a bit about yourself and what led you to become a Marine.
Well, it's an interesting story. I grew up as an Air Force dependent. My dad retired from the Air Force as a pilot during my freshman year of college. He was one of these guys that was, in my mind, always a little bit larger than life. He was a helicopter pilot. He had a tour in Vietnam during Tet Offensive time, 67, 68. He was an advisor to a South Vietnamese helicopter squadron. He came home with 3 awards of the Distinguished Flying Cross.
Wow.
I always kind of knew I liked living aboard military installations. I liked being an Air Force brat. I always knew that I would at some point serve my country in the military. I went off to college. The only ROTC program at my college was Army. I enrolled, went all the way through the program. And at the end of the 4th year, we get our branch assignments on our orders. And I'd asked to be an armor officer. I wanted tanks. And I went at active duty. And my branch assignment comes back as air defense. And I'm going into the Guard of Reserves. I can't remember now. So I have this piece of paper. I have an hour off before my next class. And I'm walking through the student union to get a cup of coffee. And I'm not very happy. And off in the corner is a Marine captain with his little table set up. And it's wintertime. He's in mod blues, long sleeve shirt and tie, blue trousers. He's got his little table set up with the blanket and the pamphlets and the little machine going with the film showing officer candidates going to the O course. And I walk up, and he doesn't have a line because this is during the Carter administration. And it's right after Vietnam's over, and it's kind of not many people are beating a path to the recruiter's doors. And I walk up and I look at his stuff and kind of stand there, and he's sizing me up, and he finally says, "Can I help you?" And I pulled this piece of paper out and I handed it to him, and I said, "Captain, if you can get me out of these, I am yours."
Wonderful.
"And I will sign today." And he says, he looks at him, his eyes bulge out, and he says, "Let me make a phone call. Don't move." He runs down the steps to the student union basement. You can hear his Corps fams tippity-tap down the stairs.
Yeah.
And he says, "They want me to have you take the ASVAB." And I said, "Okay." And then we played a game where the Army wouldn't let me go because I had taken the money. And the Marines couldn't enlist me until the Army let me go. And it worked. It took a while to work out, but it finally did. And I left the Army program with a sure thing commission in the reserves to go to OCS in the Marines.
Now, how long did you have to go until you graduated from college at that point?
We were on quarters. I had 2 quarters left. So I finished.
So that'd be roughly like your last semester.
Yeah, yeah. And went home to Virginia to where my parents were. My dad was retired, and had about 6 months off before I reported to Quantico. Went to OCS, commissioned at the end, straight to the basic school, straight to my MOS school, straight to the fleet.
Now, we hear maybe people talking about what the Paris Island experience was like. But what was it like in the officer's basic course? What was that like?
Well, OCS was nothing like any of the training that I received as an Army ROTC cadet, I will tell you that.
Really?
To the extent that it in the long run, I think the Army ROTC cadet experience probably hurt me because I had some expectation that the Marine officer training might be a little more like that, and it was nothing like that. They don't have sergeant instructors in the Army ROTC programs, and it was, I think, very similar. Friends of mine who had gone to both prior enlisted say that the stress level at OCS is higher. They're trying to stress you out, see what you do. They give you 5 things to do and time enough to give you to get 3 of them done, and they want to see what you're going to do. And of course, as you're going through it at the time, you don't know that. And so you try to do all 5 of them, and
are they hoping or maybe wondering to see if you're going to realize this and prioritize?
Yeah. The whole purpose, I think, behind OCS is to screen. It's not to train, it's to screen. And they're screening you out. And, keeping in mind, again, when I went through during the Carter administration, and all those services were downsizing after Vietnam, and, my platoon started with over 60 and we graduated 30. And some of them got hurt, but a lot of them just got weeded out. Some of them got hurt, some of them quit on their own, dropped on request after the 6th week, but most of the rest of them were shown the door because they didn't measure up. So it was unnerving to see that, yeah.
Could it happen, like you obviously wanted to be a Marine.
Right.
Just sort of young men in general who are going through this, do they have this kind of occasional anxiety thinking, I want this, I'm not sure I can do it?
I think that was probably overriding in most everybody every day, every single day. It was, you're trying to get through this because when you graduate, you're going to get commissioned the last day and you're going to get a set of bars pinned on you, but they make you want it really bad.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And they make it really hard to get. And I think at the end of that, when you do succeed and you are commissioned, and in my case, your father puts his dress blues back on that he's been retired after 5 years, and you're standing on the theater at Quantico across from him, and he's memorized your oath of office, and he's got his hand in the air, and you've got your hand in the air. It really makes it even that much more worth it.
Yeah, that is really fine. And you know what? One of the things we concentrate on here in these discussions, we've had with a number of people talking about Parris Island now, that young men, what could you say young people, but it's mostly men, first starting out, need that confidence builder that comes from a challenge that you overcame.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like that's exactly what you're talking about.
It was a challenge, challenge addressed and met, and you're right. And then when you get through that and you realize truly that's, as an officer of Marines, that's only the beginning. It's not like, well, I checked the block and now I can take my pack off and take a breath.
Right.
Because then you're going to 6 months of the basic school and you're being evaluated the whole time there. And then you get to the fleet and you're being evaluated the whole time you're in, and you're being evaluated by your seniors, and you're being in the fleet, you're being evaluated by your peers. He's a good guy, he's not, kind of stuff. And you're being evaluated by your subordinates. You truly are.
How does that work?
Well, they're watching you.
Sure.
Marines
Gotcha.
are watching you, and they're watching how you respond to events and stressors and everything under the sun that happens in a given day, in the California sun at Camp Pendleton, in my case.
What is, maybe there's no one answer to it, but, you're a second lieutenant and you go to your first unit and there's like a sergeant major there or a master gunnery sergeant. How does that interaction work?
Well, I think most lieutenants know enough to just kind of stay out of the way of the master gunnery sergeant or the sergeant major. And depending on who they are and how they are, and you've got some that, have reputations of, being hell on second lieutenants or whatever. But I always kind of felt like, especially the master gunnies were there. They were the old men of the battalion. In my field, Amtracs, we had 9 in the whole Marine Corps, including the reserve community. So they were somebodies.
Oh yeah.
And they were a wealth of knowledge and information, and most of them that I ran across in my career were there to help. And they were there to help, and they helped train and mentor and guide young officers, and like most good staff NCOs did. And I can think of a couple in particular, and I can even think of one who was a young PFC when he first came to me when I was a first lieutenant. And many years later, he retired as a Master Gunnery Sergeant here at Camp Lejeune at 2nd Amtrak Battalion. And he was the old man in the battalion. And he was the operations chief. And boy, I remember him when he was a PFC out of boot camp. And, you know, all you had to do is you ran into some Marines somewhere who were from second tracks and you mentioned his name. And, oh, yeah, I've known him forever. I knew him when he was a PFC. He knew Master Gunny so-and-so when he was, you know, it's almost like you're talking about God, you know, to these kids. And it's kind of fun. And that's, I think those are the things and the memories that really are fun to have as a Marine who's been done. The memories and especially the sea stories are always about Marines, other Marines. You know, nobody tells a sea story about a piece of gear.
Right, sure.
Okay.
Right.
Or, you know, if there's a piece of gear involved, it's about how, you know, Jones stuck his vehicle up, you know, up to the door sills, and then we all had to help him get it out. And while we were doing it, this happened or that happened, or somebody fell in the mud. And, you know, but all of our tales, I think most of our tales about the Marine Corps as we get older, and certainly tend to remember the best ones, they're always about Marines. They're always about Marines.
This is a question that, listening to you talk, has just come to me. It's think about you just remember the past,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, the things you might have gone through, and it seems like it was just the other day.
Mm-hmm.
But you remember, I've been doing this for decades.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Do you think that some of that might come from the fact that our tendency is to remember the most memorable stuff?
Yeah. And I think we tend to try to focus our memory on the good stuff.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us dwell on I think the way our brains are wired is that we remember the good things. You know, I've got memories of the Joe Hool from when we were together in Desert Storm, and he was a sergeant major and I was the S3 officer. I was the ops officer for maintenance battalion, and some of the things that he and I got to do, and, you know, some of the things we got to do with our battalion commander who we lost just a year ago. And we were talking about that before the interview. And, you know, I think we tend to remember the fun things and the things that made us laugh. And there's a lot of things in the Marine Corps that if you approach it right, will make you laugh, you know, and maybe not at the time. And maybe they make you laugh, and that maybe the individual who might be counseling you might not appreciate the laughter at the time when you've done something just to see if you can get away with it,
Uh-huh.
you know, and succeeded, and you thought you succeeded and maybe you didn't, and you're getting yelled at by somebody.
Right.
Not that ever happened to me.
No, couldn't have. No way. Well, I have asked a number of people this. Well, I thought that the drill instructors at Parris Island were funny. I think Colonel Howard said something like, yeah, not when they're directing it at you.
Yeah.
But did you find your instructors at officer school to be funny? I mean, the way they talk.
Afterwards, I think when you get to reflect on it after, you know, but certainly not when you're going through it.
Right.
And when you're going through it, it's like, just we want to just get this over with. But you know, there were funny things that happened during it. And especially once you got to the point where you knew if you were still there, you were walking across the stage and getting commissioned, unless you did something particularly heinous. And then, you know, people would do things to get under their skin just enough to let them know that we knew they were human too.
Okay, so when in your training if ever, did you know, I'm going to finish?
8th of the 10th week. I think it was 8th week. There was a point in time where they had boards for marginal candidates.
Oh, really?
And if you survived a board, or once the boards were done, whether you went through one or not, I didn't. And there's a funny story there. the platoon sergeant calls a handful of candidates by name over, and they're the guys that have got to write statements of why they should get to stay. And he didn't call my name, and I had a bad couple of days there with some things, and I was over there, and he said, "Leonard, what are you doing here?" I said, "Well, platoon sergeant, you didn't call my name." He said, "Well, I didn't call your name for a reason. You're back in the squad bay. You don't need to be here." I thought, well, I just figured, well, I was part of that group, and he just forgot to call my name, and no, I wasn't part of that group. But it's funny how they can do this to you, and it's funny how
You think that's what it was?
Yeah, I know it was. It was, you're conditioned to it's a very stressful thing, but it was a means to an end. It was a means to an end, and I've got a couple of friends still from my platoon I went through OCS with that, once a year, the phone will ring on November the 10th for some strange reason that particular day or the day before or after, hey, happy birthday, Marine, and, a couple of guys, but, that we went through that together and stood across the squad bay from each other, and you'd see the platoon sergeant and the sergeant instructor ranting and raving about something, and we'd be making faces at each other, seeing if we could get the other one to crack up and start laughing and stuff. And, but yeah. Now,
So each time you're promoted, you have greater responsibility.
Right.
Can you talk about that a little bit? Because what I want to ask, really what I want to get at is, did a time come when you could tell, I'm growing, I'm developing?
Yeah, I think one thing about Marine officers is we're always evaluating ourselves. And I think we're all also, a lot of us are our harshest critics. You want to do well. It's a very demanding environment. It's a very competitive environment. If you don't do well, you're not going to get to stick around. And the requirements of attaining a regular commission, there's requirements of getting promoted up through a certain rank. And if you don't, after a second look, you're discharged. So we're all, that's always there. That's always there. But I think there's a point in time where, depending on what the job is, you wake up and you realize, I'm pretty good at this.
Yeah.
I'm pretty good at this. And I don't think that's isolated. For me, it took a long time for me to wake up one morning and realize I'm pretty good at this as a platoon commander. And but you've got people helping you out all the way. You've got, if you listen to them, you get great staff NCOs. I in particular have and he's a friend of George. He's who I met Joe Houle through. He's a retired sergeant major. But when I met this individual, I was a second lieutenant. He was a staff sergeant. And I met him when I was an Amtracker, a brand new Amtracker. And I often say that I can claim the title of retired Marine largely because of him.
Really?
Yeah. He saw this young kid come in with like a lot of young second lieutenants. I won't say I thought I knew it all, because I didn't, but I knew what I didn't know, I thought. And, but he saw something in me, and he saw somebody that maybe needed to have their hands put on their shoulders, and maybe instead of going this way, gently turn them, go that way, and did it in such a way that you didn't feel like you were being corrected by an enlisted man,
right,
or being, belittled in any way, but, helps with your personal professional growth. I will tell you, in the case of this particular individual, there were many counseling sessions that occurred after hours in a place where adult beverages were served, and maybe some of those counseling sessions were while making triple bank shots off a pool table.
Okay.
And Joe knows who I'm talking about. And but it's I think that's a big part of officer development, is especially for junior officers, having that staff sergeant or that gunny who's willing to take the time with you. And, you know, when I first came in, all of our staff and COs had been to Vietnam, especially in Amtrak's. And they brought something to the table that, you know, a second lieutenant out of college doesn't have. And they were, you know, the good ones were good about, I've always said that officers train other officers. Staff and COs teach. And there's a difference.
This is, you were touching on something really important, and that is, and certainly with regard to our mission here, you're growing as an officer, but you're growing as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And as a human being, you will eventually be a civilian again. Would you say it that way?
Yeah.
Or, I mean, once a Marine, always a Marine, but you're not active duty.
Right.
Right. If you had to explain how your time as a Marine helped you to be a better citizen?
Well, I think that those of us who spent careers in the Marine Corps, and probably any branch, but the Marine Corps, we understand the concept of service. And we understand about, you know, being a part of something that's, you know, not to use all the TV commercial lines, but something that's, you know, you're some part of something that's bigger than yourself. And, you know, community. And, you know, I was, when my son was little, I coached youth soccer for a while. You know, they couldn't get enough parents, and I didn't know a darn thing about soccer. And me and one other parent said, yeah, we'll do it. And, you know, you do that, you remember your community, you know, you take the time to be involved. And you know, you're 10 years later, you're walking through a store in the same town, and you're back visiting, and you hear some familiar voice, and you're, hey, Coach Tom, and you turn around, you're looking for some guy that's like this big, and he's, you know, this big now, because, you know, and they remember stuff. And, you know, my son was married. His best man was his college roommate. He was also one of our soccer players. And he brings to the wedding, he brings all these pictures, the group photos from all the years we were together. Oh, wow. And he was, you know, and it was all Coach, you know, and stuff like that. But, you know, once I retired, and I know we talked about this earlier, once I retired, I didn't go back to work, and I, you know, live in a small beach town here in North Carolina, and kind of wasn't real happy with how I saw things being run in the town, and I thought I could do better. And, you know, it's the old service thing. And, you know, ran for public office, and, you know, I'm on my 101st month as a local alderman, which is our word for councilman, in the town of North Topsail Beach. And, you know, you volunteer, you give your time, you know, they pay you a little bit every month, but you burn it all up in gas and time, and, you know, just you feed it back into the town. And, but it's, you know, it's time consuming. It's sometimes thankless, but, you know, you like to think that at the end of it all, you've made some level of measurable difference. And in my case, you know, you made your town a better place to live and work and play for your vacationers. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot to people who've spent a career in the Marine Corps. You know, very few of them walk away and get in a recliner. I mean, they all find things to do, and a lot of them find ways to help make the community a better place. You look at in the community here outside of Camp Lejeune, all of the veterans organizations, you know, your VFW and your AMVETS and all those kinds of organizations. And, you know, you go aboard the base, and there's the retiree council. I'm a member of that. I think Joe might be too. You know, the birthday ball committee. People are always, you know, I'm not saying they're looking for things to do, because they don't really have to look very hard, because there's plenty to do. But you look at how involved in any community, but particularly this one, how involved your veterans and particularly your retired community is. And they're great people. And I mean, they're the kind of people you want to live next door to. They truly are. People that if you're, if you're in a jam, they're right there.
We say one of the things that's missing in our society. How do you have a society of 330 million people? I don't know if that's not the right word for it, but people need community. They need, right. and which is really another way of saying a tradition.
Right.
And that certainly seems to exist here.
Yes, it does. And I think you have a lot of, I don't know what the other services are like, but I think in the Marine Corps, you tend to see a lot of, well, I'm joining because my dad was in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And his dad was in. You have a lot of multi-generational families who, it's maybe not expected, but, dad's really happy to hear that Junior is, Junior's following in his footsteps. And, I look back like right after 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we all will agree that we were a different society right after 9/11. And we were, if we all treated each other in this country the way we treated each other on 9/12, we wouldn't have all the problems that we have, I think, today, because everybody was kind of pulled together due to the tragedy. But, I was in then, and I was in when we went to Iraq in 2003. I went as part of the group that went. But I had a young Marine working for me before I retired who was a post 9/11 enlistee.
Really?
And he was a wounded warrior. He came over from the Wounded Warrior Battalion. I needed clerical help in my shop, and he was wandering around one day looking for a job. He was tired of sitting at the Wounded Warrior Barracks. Right then, it was next to the MEF headquarters, and watching TV and playing pool. And he was out looking for a job, and he happened to walk into my office, and I called his CO, who was a friend of mine, and said, I've got Lance Corporal so-and-so over here, and he's looking for a job, and I could use him. He says, okay, he'll start on Monday. I couldn't get to work in front of that kid. Every day, that young Marine was waiting at the door for me to unlock, and I started setting an alarm earlier and driving. It was a 40-minute drive from where I live, but so, and he and I were in a room probably twice the size of this one, but we were talking all the time. And if you think about Radar or Riley and either one of the two commanders on MASH, it kind of became that sort of almost a father-son type of relationship. But he joined the Marine Corps as a direct result of what happened on that morning on 9/11. He said, I joined because I was angry about what happened.
What's interesting about that, that's get your take on this. You read about, after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, there was a rush all over the country of young people that joined the military. Do you think that spirit is still among us?
I don't think we'll know unless something bad happens. I think you'll always have that element that's there. I don't know if the numbers are the same. I don't know if the percentage is the same. I think the more time we spend on Facebook and on our phones, the worse things get, potentially. I don't think, and I'm as guilty of it as everybody else, although I will say that probably the two best things about that particular social media is, reconnecting with people from way back in the day. And, you get this message, hey, sir, I don't know if you remember me, but I was in your platoon in.
Oh, sure.
And of course I remember you, and then all of a sudden you have another Facebook friend. But I don't know how healthy all that is in the big picture, and not that part of it, but the amount of time we spend glued to our devices.
Right.
And, I think we've got a lot of people who don't know what to do when they go outside. because they've never grown up
That's a good way to put it.
going outside doing what we did when we were kids, going outside and you ride your bike to your friend's house and hang out in the backyard and, climb trees and do stuff
Climb
like that.
trees, and dig holes and stuff.
Yeah, and, play war.
Yeah, play war.
Those skill sets, I think, are important, especially for kids that are like 8, 9, 10 years old.
I was a Cub Scout and later a Boy Scout, and you know how when you're a Cub Scout you have den mothers, and you're a little bit tender yet to be with, but then you become a Boy Scout, but they put you through hardships. Remember something called the Order of the Arrow, and it was the final thing to get in was called an ordeal. Yeah. Does that go on much anymore?
I don't know. My son's in his 30s, so my grandson's 4. I guess we'll see as my grandson grows up what it's like. But I don't know if any of that goes on anymore. I have no idea.
Do you think it's true? This has been my experience that people older than you, people younger than you, but for the most part, you're sort of going through life with people roughly your age.
Right.
And so wouldn't it be the case that people roughly your age and mine would use social media differently than maybe somebody who's 15?
I would hope
or
so.
25.
Yeah, I would hope so. I think you can get caught up in it quick though.
Yeah.
And you get busy doing something and, oh wow, I didn't check my social media this morning. And you know what? Maybe I just won't today.
Yeah.
And you see some of these sites that are like dedicated to like an informal town site or a local village news kinds of things, and they become often the backyard gossip across the backyard fence that happened physically in the 60s has now happened electronically.
Can you really have the kind of tradition? This is almost a rhetorical question. Can you have the kind of tradition that makes life enriching and makes for human flourishing digitally?
I don't believe you can. I'm sure there are people there who are decades younger than I who would obviously disagree with me because some spend their whole.
But I wonder if people would say, younger people anyway, would say that because they haven't experienced the real deal.
Yeah, I think you're right. I do. Absolutely agree with that.
What, as you were speaking earlier, there was a question I wanted to ask you. Do you have any, maybe it was a command or an assignment or something in your Marine Corps career that really stands out to you as something that was just great?
It's a hard question. I have memories, exceptionally good memories from probably every job I had.
Wow.
And I have some bad memories probably from every job too.
Right.
Because that's just the nature of the beast. But I can think of, and every one of them has to do with somebody or, more of a somebody than a something. And I remember when I was a young lieutenant, had that staff sergeant who took me under his wing and, really, really got me on the right track. This is back in 1979, had a young married Lance Corporal. He was my only junior Marine that was married. He had a little boy, and he had dropped out of high school because his girlfriend was with child and did the right thing. And he left when he was, we really tried many times, put him in front of Meritorious Corporal Board. Cutting scores for corporal in our OC field were horrible back then. And he went away, a Lance Corporal, went off to barracks duty somewhere, and I never saw him again. And I'm with Joe in the port of Jubail, Saudi Arabia, at the end of Desert Storm, and all of the Amtraks and tanks and everything, everybody's retrograding back down to the port to go home. And I hear all these AAVs staging across the street. I'll just go over there and see if I know anybody. I walk up, there's a Lance Corporal locking up a vehicle. Hey, Marine, who you with? Sir, I'm with Alpha Company, 3rd Platoon, 3rd AAVs. Well, that was my old unit, my old platoon. And I say, hey, who are your staff NCOs here? And he starts rattling them off. And that Lance Corporal from 1979 was a gunny.
Wow.
And was his platoon sergeant.
Really?
So think about that. He's the platoon sergeant for the same platoon he was in as a Lance Corporal. And this is in 99, I guess 91, and we were together in that platoon in 79. I said, is he here? And he says, yeah, he's right over here. Walked over, had not seen him. And he's up there and he's stirring a canteen cup of C-Rat coffee. He's got a cigarette in his mouth with an ash on it about this long. And he always liked to smoke in our track vehicles, and it's not allowed in the Amtraks. And it goes back to when the P5s were gasoline powered, and they carried about 400 gallons of MoGas.
Good heavens.
And I walked up the ramp of the vehicle, and the deck plates had all been removed, unbolted, so they could be checked underneath for contraband. So when I stepped off the ramp and jumped both feet onto the deck plate, it slapped against the bottom of the vehicle, made a very loud noise, and in my best butt chewing, I was like, God damn it. How many times do I have to tell you you're not supposed to smoke on an Amtrak? And he looked at me, the coffee cup went out of his hand. And so we had a nice reunion, and obviously I still get kind of choked up about it.
Did he salute you?
And we were in a vehicle.
Okay.
So we talked, and I mentioned to him that I always remembered about him with his wife coming to pick him up in their brown 68 Mustang with the little boy in the back seat. That day was that little boy's 13th birthday.
Wow. Wow. Not such a little boy anymore.
Yeah. But, had good tours. Got to 1st Track Vehicle Battalion as first lieutenant on Okinawa. Had been told through the rumor mill of everybody coming home, hey, they got you on the colonel's board, slated to be the adjutant. I was like, okay, well, I'm only going to be there a year. I can do anything for a year. And I get there, and they send a 2nd lieutenant in a vehicle down and pick me up at Joint Reception Center. In the vehicle with this guy, who I later find out he's from Hawaii. We did 4 years in Hawaii, and he and my sister were classmates at school, in intermediate school. But, I'm asking him all these questions about things, and it's yes, sir, no, sir, yes, sir, no, sir. And I'm first lieutenant, he's 2nd lieutenant. And I said, okay, I'll bite. Why are you calling me, sir? And he says, well, because next week you're going to be our company commander when Lieutenant so-and-so leaves. And because he's in a command position, although he's a first lieutenant, he has us call him sir. I said, so I'm not going to be the adjutant? He says, no, you've taken over Alpha Company. I took command of the company on my birthday.
Wow.
And what happened was the guy I was relieving, who'd had the company for a while, he'd been the XO, and then the captain left, and they fleeted him up until he left. He and I had been friends at Camp Pendleton at 3rd Tracks. And he went in and he told the colonel, hey, I know this guy, Leonard. And he's going to make a lousy adjutant. He said, he'd probably be a pretty good company commander. And that's how I was a first lieutenant in a major's job. And I had a blast. I just had a blast. It was a great job. I had great Marines. I came down here after a stint at Quantico, took over H&S Company, 2nd Tracks. Previous commander, battalion commander, had rotated company commanders through H&S on their way to line companies. The new colonel came in. Then the battalion XO on Okinawa, he knew I'd had a line company. He says, you're going down to H&S and you're staying there until you're done. It's not a stepping stone. I said, okay, does that mean I get to fix it? He says, what I want you to do. I had the best first sergeant in the Marine Corps. guy named Feliciano. He's no longer with us. He'd been about this tall. I think he was about 5'4", weighed about 110 pounds, soaking wet, could run all day and run all night. He'd been born in San Juan, raised on the streets of Chicago, had the homemade tattoos with India ink on both arms, had been a tunnel rat in Vietnam. And he was truly one of the finest Marines I've ever known in my life. And we just had that thing that clicks between a commander and a senior enlisted. And we were like two cops on that were partners. It was a real partnership, and we just had a great time. And I still hear from Marines from that tour. He had a handful of young, hungry corporals and sergeants, one in every section, or at least one. And he used to refer to them as the committee, which kind of unnerved me a little bit, because I didn't know, does that committee mean blanket party or what? But they were those young Marines that when we would run company PTs and PT and have the runs, these were the guys that would fall out and call the cadence, and they were all future leaders. And he knew how to shape them. And he held monthly NCO PMEs. This is back even before General Gray was on top of it, and monthly PMEs at the NCO club with beer afterwards for those who were old enough to drink. We had a couple of NCO mess nights in the company, and he really brought these guys together. But the committee was interesting, because over the remainder of my career, every one of those Marines, every one of them stayed in. Every one of them attained at least the rank of gunnery sergeant. And one of them retired as a CW05.
Really?
Yeah. And every one of those Marines, when you run into them, and they're all retired now, but they all talk about that tour. They all talk about that first sergeant and how important he was in their career development.
One of the things that stands out about this conversation, and it's so glad that it's being recorded, is because people come front and center.
They do.
And that's a message we want to communicate to our countrymen who might be struggling with confusion or maybe, even thoughts that, this whole social order needs to come down.
Yeah.
Well, we take a different view of it, won't we? If we say, no, we'll defend it.
I don't follow you. I don't. Maybe I was not paying attention when I was trying to not spill.
No, I wasn't being very clear.
No. Say it again.
Okay. It's what we can recognize, that there are problems, and those problems need to be addressed. Something like that is why you became an alderman, right?
Right.
And so, can we not, at one and the same time, realize there are problems? I can identify them. We can work with others, discuss them, try to address them, but still, this place is worth defending.
Oh, absolutely. It absolutely is. I mean, it's still the greatest country in the world. I think it's, our society, and, we've got our ills, and we've got a lot of politically driven agenda. And I don't think that's anything new. I just think that with the amount of, going back to the comments about social media, I think that you can't escape it the way you could. When we were kids, the way you escaped it was mom or dad shut the television off.
Yeah.
Before we sat down to eat.
Yep, that's right.
Of course, then it took 20 minutes to warm back up for all the tubes to heat up inside it when we got done. But, now you've got folks that, watch them eat, and they're, and one eye on their food and one eye on their phone, and going back to that thing. But, and I don't think that, I think part of the social media issue, to kind of bring it to that a little bit again, is people say things to each other on social media they would never say face to face.
I have
There's
heard
a
that. I don't do social media
anonymity there
Yeah.
that absolutely degrades the experience of communication.
It degrades the people who participate in it.
Yeah, it does too. You're right. But yeah, our country is and always will be worth defending. And you look back at, my mom lost 2 brothers in World War II. My dad served in Vietnam. My dad's brother served in Vietnam. I did Desert Storm in Iraq twice. And, our family's got a little bit of skin in the game here.
Right.
And, and I'm proud of that. I'm very proud of it. But yeah, I honestly, truly believe, and I think we need to make some major course corrections to have a country worth defending in the future.
That is true.
To lay it all out and be, brutally honest about it. We're going to make some major course corrections here.
Yeah. I mean, we've at least thought about it, if not seen it, that something that takes a long time to build up can be wrecked really fast.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially, I think, when the things that are wrecking it have been building up for a long time too, and people either have ignored them or just don't recognize that they're building up. And, maybe an example of that is 9/11. That didn't happen. That wasn't planned on a Friday afternoon.
That's right. Right.
on the back of a cocktail napkin in some bar, and then, executed on a Tuesday. I mean, that had been going on, and all the analysis that's done after a major catastrophe like that, leads to the facts that there was a lot of stuff, a lot of key items that were missed by those agencies that are supposed to not miss that stuff.
Do you think this is something that we can't ultimately squeeze out of a system or an institution where 9/11 is a good example of it, but we have others where you say the warning signs were all there.
Yeah.
Why didn't somebody talk about it?
Well, we can go back to Pearl Harbor for that one, though.
Sure.
I think that, people miss things. And, it's easy to sit back and that's bring it all the way back around to now. And all the way back around to now into what I do now. Okay? It's really easy to sit back and be a keyboard warrior or an armchair quarterback.
Right. That's right.
And, I hate to be the guy that would miss something like that, but, at the same time, things like that happen, and the guy in the breach is the guy in the breach, and it's easy to sit back and criticize others, and why didn't you see it, or surely you must have seen that or known that, or how could you miss that? Well, you think you can do better, step up.
Have at it.
We got a lot of, and I think maybe that's part of the issue with the social media stuff again, and we seem to continue to come back to that, is that it provides that conduit for people to, criticize, but never to have to step up. There's a whole lot of value in to me. There's a whole lot of value in the phrase "put up or shut up." You think you can do better? Volunteer. Volunteer. In my town, we always need volunteers. We used to have 2 separate boards, a board of adjustment and a planning board. Used to be 2 different groups of people, but over time, people left and moved away. Some passed away, got too old, whatever, no longer, just wanted off of it. And now we have 2 boards with the same set of people serving as citizen volunteers. So what's wrong with that picture? And, I know why some of it happened, because it had to do with our board a number of years ago, but, get out, volunteer, help fix it. Help fix it. Don't just complain.
Yeah.
Don't just complain. Find a way to help.
Be an active citizen.
Yeah.
That's where, in a way, this conversation's been going. We'd like to ask you sort of as we close. And every time this question is asked, I wonder, how would I answer it? Yeah, you shouldn't ask a question unless you know the answer, but put up or shut up is a great way to put it. You should put that on a sweater. But what does the Marine Corps have to offer to America, let's say, beyond what it already does, as with its tradition of honor, courage, commitment, and discipline, and standards, and they're adhered to Americans who might be a bit confused about what is the purpose of America anyway?
Well, I think, when you talk about the Marine Corps in terms of initial training, either officer or enlisted, you probably the first week you learn the courtesies of customs and condition, or all of that stuff. Okay, the traditions. You learn where the Marine Corps was founded. You learn the birth date. You learn why it was founded. All that stuff you learn up front. And I think in a lot of ways our dwelling on that, which is probably not the right word, but our insistence on instilling that into our newest sessions, both sides of the rank structure, sets us apart from the other services. I think we drill it into our guys, and I'm probably not the only guy who's gone up to the Tun Tavern marker in Philadelphia and got their picture taken next to it, which I did last December when I was up in Philly for the Army-Navy game. For us, that's kind of like getting your picture taken like that. That's like going to Mecca. You got to do it. And but we do instill all those customs, courtesies, traditions for a reason. And it cements to the new guys, the guys that are going to do that to the generation behind them.
Right.
Why is this so important? Why is it so important? And the fact that it is important. But I think for our youth today, it's if you're confused or you don't know what to do. How many Marines have we all known? Adrift out of high school, don't know what to do, whether it's wartime or not. Maybe this will put me on the right path. There's a great quote by, baseball player Ted Williams about his time as a Marine. I don't remember it exactly, but he talks about that's what he always wanted to be known for. Lee Marvin was
Lee Marvin.
But I think what we have to offer youth is a path forward, a purpose. Bringing it around to all of us. We come out hopefully better citizens, and citizens with a purpose, and citizens who understand that there is service after taking off the uniform, and at some degree it's always about service, maybe down at the community level or higher. One of our state senators from North Carolina, from our district, was a 4-year Marine. And he was a 4-year Marine from Chicago. He went to boot camp, served here at Camp Lejeune. Interestingly enough, in my discussions with the man, come to find out that he was a young Lance Corporal PFC over on Okinawa at the same camp I was when I was that Amtrak company commander at Camp Schwab in 1982. He was UDP from here, but he was assigned here. And when he was discharged from the Marine Corps, he made this his home. He never went back to Chicago. He owns some pizza restaurants.
You're talking about Senator Lazar.
I'm talking about Michael Lazar.
He's a good friend of this organization.
But now he was councilman in Jacksonville. He was the mayor pro tem in Jacksonville, and now he's our state senator. And not only is he very good to this organization, he's been very good to my town.
Really?
Yes, and but he's an example. He's a perfect example of. He did 4 years. He did 4 years. He didn't do 30, but he did 4 years, and he took that big chunk of that Marine Corps birthday cake, and he's lived his life and his professional life with regard to politics and service
Yeah.
and service. He's a great example of that, and
He
he's a
was-
good friend.
He is a fine man. He was at um, the ceremony remembering Beirut
Yeah,
back in October, and General Gray was there. And General Gray was sitting up on the platform waiting for everything to begin, or it might have been just after. And Senator Lazaro was able to go up there and have his picture taken with him and chat with him for a while.
I saw him there. I was there too.
Oh, okay.
I saw him there. I try to go every year. I won't be going this year, unfortunately. I'll be attending my high school 50th class reunion in Honolulu.
You didn't graduate in Honolulu, did you?
I did 3 of my 4 years there. We did 8th through 11th grade in Hawaii, and then my father got transferred at the end of my junior year to Whiteman Air Force Base, Missouri.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
a big change.
Yeah, it was culture shock.
Yeah.
It was culture shock.
Good
Yeah.
heavens.
Yeah, we had more people in my high school class in Hawaii than are in the whole school for 4 grades in Missouri. And
Was it out in the cornfield?
yeah, it was pretty much out. It was a SAC missile base
Oh,
back then. It's now where the B-2s are, but it's next to a little town called Knob Noster, Missouri. Yeah, it was quite a change. There was a handful of us who were in my senior class who were all in the same boat. There were 4 of us in the same neighborhood that our parents had moved there right before our senior year, so we kind of became the outcasts and hung out together for the year. But yeah, so I won't make the Beirut this year, and I really hate that I'm not, but I've gone every other year, I think, and I know this is a milestone year, the 40th, and yeah.
Yeah, this is, you think that was so long ago, and yet there are people living in this community who are dramatically affected by it.
Mm-hmm. I have a couple of good friends, and I didn't know them at the time. They were East Coasters, and they were here. I had just come home. I was on leave in Virginia. Just come back from Okinawa when the bombing took place, and but I've got 2 or 3 friends I can think of right offhand who were casualty calls officers for Beirut. And what was interesting was, I guess it was the last year before we stopped, the last year before COVID, when they really, narrowed down on public attendance at the memorials. My one friend who lives out in Sneads Ferry, he actually reconnected with the family at the memorial service, probably back in 2019. The family who he knocked on the door back in 1983. And the other one, actually both of them have reconnected with their families. The little kids are, middle-aged.
Yeah.
And but you're right. It really, I don't know, in a lot of ways it did shape and define this community, though, in terms of pulling together.
Yeah.
As did Desert Storm. And a lot of the changes have been made here since Desert Storm. When the base effectively emptied itself to go to the sandbox in '90, a lot of Marines sent their families home. They didn't like a lot of what was going on out in town. A lot of the relationships between the merchants and the Marines, and the places with the high interest rate car loans and all that.
Right,
And the city took note, and the city, to their credit, said, "Hey, we got to make some changes here."
That's good.
And they did. They made changes, and they made this much more, I think, of a military family friendly environment. And people like Sammy Phillips, who's a mayor, folks like that who have really tried to live it, and not just talk it, but live it, and make it a very military friendly community. I know we are out where I live. We have a lot of Marines that like to stay at the beach. We have a lot of Marines who like to retire at the beach, like I did, and we love our military.
Well said.
Yeah, we love our military. I mean, we kind of have to. We had a gunnery sergeant who had spent a lot of time living in North Topsail Beach. I don't know where he was originally from, but he was an engineer, and he was wounded in November of '05 and medevaced to Landstill, and succumbed to his wounds a day or two after he was medevaced. And the town at the time, and I was still on active duty, but the town leaders at the time decided to name a street in his honor. And so they didn't just name it after him, like, his last name, but this Marine was Gunnery Sergeant Darrell W. Boatman. And when you drive down the road and you see the street sign, it's GYSGT, this is the sign, D.W. Boatman Drive. They really named the street after Gunny Boatman.
This is leading by example.
Yep.
Which I suppose, if we want to address the problems of our society, we have to sort of, first of all, live like the answer to it.
Yeah. And never stop fighting. And I mean, as you get older, it gets harder to fight. But if there's injustices or things that you don't agree with, or just, in my case, and I'll be very blunt about it, not necessarily agreeing with the current flow of some of our societal issues.
Sure.
You gotta dig your heels in. And, where did a lot of us learn how to dig in our heels? Right there.
Sir, that is the perfect place to wrap up what has been a conversation that belongs in this mission.
Well, it's been a pleasure. It truly has.
Thank you, sir.
I wasn't sure what we were going to say or how it was going to go, but I've enjoyed this, and I hope my rambling for the past couple hours has been relevant.
No, you drifted back and forth between being interesting and inspiring.
Well, so thank you.
This is really good. And we will say to our viewers, this is Lieutenant Colonel Tom Leonard, United States Marine Corps retired, United States citizen, active duty.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.